Hi everyone, I'm back, and today I'm going to continue last Saturday's Symptom Saturday topic regarding my HLA genotype 4353. So quick recap, that genotype basically makes it difficult for the body to identify toxins and remove them. So that leads to an increase in inflammation and a cascade of symptoms and food intolerances. For me, some people have environmental intolerances or both, and this just leads to ongoing chronic illness. So today I'm going to go through a list. I really wasn't able to think of a lot of things, but these are the most common that I hear. And I know there's a million other ones I'm going to think about once I get off of here, but these are comments or questions or things that people say to me that can just easily be explained by watching my last video on the HLA genotype. So one of the first things that people will relate this to is something called mast cell disease. And I've had a few people ask me, or a few people actually tell me. People don't usually ask, they just tell you. But I've had several people say, you probably have mast cell disease. You need to go see a doctor. You probably have mast cell disease. And this is not the same as mast cell disease. Mast cell disease is basically, it's like a histemic type of reaction that you get to lots of different things, but it's not really, you can't, sometimes they can't pinpoint what it is that they're allergic to. You just have this overreaction in the body. There are some triggers like sunlight, certain foods. Some people are able to identify those things, but for the most part it's just an overreaction of the immune system. And these people can have near fatal anaphylaxis. I don't want to say on a regular basis, but repeatedly. So more than once. Or they just have, moderate anaphylaxis or mild anaphylaxis, but they will break out in a rash. It's like having an allergic reaction, a rash, difficulty breathing, that kind of thing. So this genotype is not mast cell disease. It's a genetic mutation. I do not have an allergy. They are sensitivities. So let me give you an example. If I have wheat, anything that has gluten in it, I will get a bad headache. I'll get a really bad headache and sometimes nausea, digestive issues, that kind of thing. If I have, let's say, a lot of sugar, I will get, gassy, bloating, constipation, acne. It is not an allergy. It's a sensitivity or an intolerance. And it actually just causes further inflammation in the body. So I have to avoid these things in order to keep my inflammation in check. If I just keep eating these things that are upsetting me, my inflammation is going to climb. And that leads me to the next comment in question. I've had people tell me, well, you just need to eat things. You just need to eat. You just need to go out and eat a hamburger. Even if it bothers you, you need to eat it because you're so thin. Now, this is counterproductive. And the reason it's counterproductive is because, like I just mentioned, once you develop the intolerance to something, it contributes to the inflammatory cascade. So, once I became intolerant to gluten, now if I eat it, it's just going to make things worse. It's not going to make me gain weight. It will actually make me lose weight. It will cause increased nausea, loss of appetite, and increased inflammation. So once you develop an intolerance, that thing becomes an offender, and it will just make my inflammation climb. So it's very important for me to avoid the things that make me feel sick. And yes, I understand people's reasoning. I look very thin and I'm on a very restricted diet. It does have a tendency to look like anorexia, like I'm controlling my portions or controlling, the foods that I eat. But I also don't want to be in pain. I don't want to have fatigue. I don't want to be in pain. I don't want to have constant nausea. Before I started treatment for Lyme disease and biotoxin illness, I was nauseated most of the day. And I was also still very, very thin and, could barely eat because I was constantly nauseated. I had GERD. I had, just everything was a mess. Once I was put on a diet, the nausea calmed down and I was able to eat comfortably, and I did put on a little bit of weight. If I start eating food that offending foods, I'm going to lose more weight. And as you can clearly see, I can't afford to lose any more weight than, there's nothing to lose here. So, that's my reasoning behind that. And I get this comment constantly of just, you need to eat this, you need to eat that, get yourself a good hamburger, get yourself a this, you need to have a lot of fat. And it's like, it doesn't work that way. There is a science behind this. It's a genetic mutation. I just have it. Maybe one of my parents has it as well. But it just works differently when you have a chronic illness. So the other very, very common, and this one I just call it the have you tried. So I'm just going to categorize it as the have you tried question. Have you tried medical marijuana? Have you tried bee sting therapy? Have you tried, I've had someone suggest hydrogen peroxide therapy, like 1,000,000 times to me. And my first reaction is wanting to slap them in the face, but the explanation behind this is I have the HLA genotype 4353, and these types of treatments can be potentially very dangerous for me. So even though I said that this is not mast cell disease, the sensitivities can become pretty severe. Especially, with bee sting therapy. Bee stings can cause severe allergic reactions in regular people. So I may be more susceptible to a severe allergic reaction or just some kind of severe reaction, of another type, severe headache, maybe seizures, migraines, something. So it's best to just stay away from these things. As far as medical marijuana, I've had no less than 50,000 people suggest this to me, and yes, I have tried medical marijuana, and I gave it 110%. I tried the oils, I tried the dry herb, I tried not THC, the name is eluding me, the oil without the THC. And I've tried it all. And sometimes the initial reaction is pretty okay. I'll get a little high and it'll increase my appetite, but it's not sustainable. The more I use it, the more intolerant I become to it. The oils were not great. I had many side effects. One of the side effects was actually pain, and I don't have severe pain on a regular basis. And when I was trying the I keep forgetting the name, not the THC oil, the other oil, the other part of marijuana that is not THC, I developed really bad pain in my lower back and my knees. So this is because of this genotype, this 4353 genotype. This is not going to happen to everybody. There are some people that swear by medical marijuana. They say that it has saved their life, that it has done so many things for them. And that's why I gave it the good old college try, because I heard so many great things about it. Unfortunately, genetically, I am not built for this kind of thing. And that is the reason why I've stayed away from even trying bee sting therapy, and why hydrogen peroxide therapy could be potentially dangerous for me, even though, there's people that say it's absolutely safe. For a person with my genetic problems, we cannot take this risk. It can lead to, like I said, an increase in inflammation, and as I mentioned previously, that increase of inflammation is just going to lead to a cascade, and then I'll just keep becoming more and more intolerant more quickly to everything else. So it's imperative to keep inflammation low. One of the most insensitive comments is, so-and-so's already better and they have the same thing that you have. So-and-so has, this, and this, and, they did this treatment and this helped them. Why don't you do this treatment? So I'm constantly compared to other people with Lyme disease or with some other kind of disease, and number one, it's not a good thing to do. Never compare, you're comparing, even within the Lyme community, you can be comparing apples and oranges, and that is because of this genotype. A person who has recovered from Lyme disease, I know the singer Thalia had it and she's fine now. Well, she probably doesn't have any of these genotypes, or she probably has one of the genotypes that, maybe that's just exclusive to mold or just exclusive to Lyme disease. I have the genotype that is sensitive to both mold and Lyme. So, or she may not have the genotype at all. Everybody is different. Our genetics are all different, and she lucked out. So it's really not fair to compare people at all. So that's what I have to say about that. Our genetics are all different. Another question that I've gotten asked is, and this one is kind of rare, but I've had doctors mention it, and it's, why don't you get a feeding tube? You're so thin, why don't you get a feeding tube? Apart from the fact that I have malabsorption, I'm not going to absorb, nutrients, I also have this genotype. So anything that they put in the feeding tube, I will eventually become intolerant to as well. So over time, it will make me sick. I may start off just fine with whatever formula they give me through a feeding tube, but over time, because I'm exposed to it over and over and over again, and because my inflammation is not being treated, I will eventually become intolerant to that as well. So it's kind of pointless to put a hole in myself to get a feeding tube in there when the feeding tube is going to have to be taken off eventually. So the big question is, how do you detox then? How do you detox if your body doesn't know how to do it? So there are manual ways to detox. Apple pectin, glutathione, glutathione IVs, oral glutathione, activated charcoal pills, apple pectin, I think I might have said apple pectin, cholestyramine. All of these things can help aid in detoxification. Now, there is one caveat here. I have the HLA genotype 4353, and as I've already repeated, I become increasingly intolerant to things that I ingest, and most of these things have to be ingested. So I have already become intolerant to apple pectin. Cholestyramine is not for long-term use, but it does upset my stomach. Activated charcoal also upsets my stomach, so I have to take it very sparingly. IV glutathione is very expensive, and I did not find it helpful, but I also have side effects from that. So that is the problem with this genotype. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And eventually you will create intolerances to anything. So that's the tough part. Now, the only thing I want to end this video by saying is that, of course, what you're probably thinking right now is, well, if you're going to become intolerant to everything, food, water, medications, that can have some very serious consequences. And the only thing that I want to say about that is that people do not recognize Lyme disease or biotoxin illness as a fatal disease, and that is very false. And the reason that is false is because of these genetic abnormalities. And if people were more knowledgeable about these genetic problems, they could see that Lyme disease is a lot more than just a chronic infection. it can be a fatal disease. And yes, I do think about the future when it comes to all of these problems, and I do think about what that means for me. And yes, it's a very scary reality, but we do what we can. I stick to my diet. This is the reason I stick to my diet, even though people, get very aggressive about me, being so thin. But the reason I stick to my diet is because it's going to extend my lifespan, even if it's just by a little bit. Without sticking to my diet, without sticking to my treatment protocol, my supplements, the supplements that I can still take, unfortunately, that's going to cut things a little bit short. As I mentioned earlier, I don't have a lot of weight to lose. A couple pounds can be the difference between developing more complications from this disease. So that's kind of what I want people to take away from this video. This video was longer than my last one, and the reason why is because I really want people to understand that this disease is a life-threatening condition. It's a complicated disease. It is not just a matter of taking antibiotics for 6 months or a year. It's incredibly complex, and we need to recognize that in order for it to get the attention that it deserves, and for treatment to be approved, and for insurance companies to finally say, okay, people are going to start dying from this thing if we don't start approving treatment, and start looking into different types of treatment for this disease. So that's the takeaway from this video. I'll be back again very soon. I hope you guys really think about this, especially if you know somebody in your life that has Lyme or biotoxin illness. Before you start asking them or actually telling them what they need to do, think about genetic issues, think about all the different challenges that are presented to people with these illnesses, and think twice about what you say, before you say it. So thank you guys for joining me, and I'll be back again very soon.